Thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to explore some of these thoughts and ideas with you.
It's just been just rich conversations we've had off of the recordings, and I just thought it would be great to bring some of your thoughts to leaders who are looking at strategies for where to take things right now. So, really glad to continue talking about what we've been talking about and build on that today. Um,
Well, me too.
Before I do, I want to welcome you to the video call this and introduce you to our audience. So, everyone, this is Jennie Tranter. She is a psychotherapist, coach, and systems thinker dedicated to bridging personal transformation with societal change. With a deep background in international relations, finance, and economics, she has worked for the World Bank, Federal Reserve Banks of New York and San Francisco, and Wells Fargo, among other places. Jennie is passionate about fostering individual and collective resilience in an era of rapid change. She envisions creating community-driven initiatives that address trauma, addiction, loneliness, and systemic disconnection, helping people move beyond limiting narratives toward greater agency, connection, and well-being. And we are really fortunate that Jennie is an affiliate coach with Evolve Impact.
Mm.
So great to be talking with you in that context as well.
Yeah.
Jennie's work integrates psychological depth, embodied practices, and strategic insight. Her approach supports personal healing and structural transformation. So she has a master's in counseling psychology with a focus on depth psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute in California. Welcome, Jennie.
Thank you so much. Really good to be with you here.
I want to start with a question for you about your own personal journey. How
Sure.
is it that someone who spent so much time in finance and economics and international relations, how did you end up in counseling psychology and coaching today?
That's a great question. I think I come from a family of helpers, so doctors, nurses, teachers. So I think
Mm.
I've always had a very strong thread of wanting to be engaged in supporting others and bringing about positive change. And, came out of college, ended up in finance, my first master's actually at Johns Hopkins in international relations and economics, was really fascinated by the big picture of how humans work in systems, which is really what finance and government are. And after many years of doing that and always doing a lot of volunteer work on the side to really get that personal piece filled up, that personal need bucket, felt like I wasn't sort of close enough to the ground and really doing something in a way that fed my soul. Also, to depth psychology, Carl Jung, around the age of 40, kind of had that classical midlife crisis of what am I doing in the world and what is my legacy? And decided I really wanted to work more directly with people and engage in change. And so made that shift. Kind of started right around, I guess, a few years before the pandemic. And then, finished grad school in the pandemic. And I've been doing this now for about 5 years. The counseling side of things, the coaching for a bit longer.
Wow, that's amazing to hear about your journey. So many people are at the same kind of a similar place and questioning um, if what they've been doing before is working for them now in terms of their career and what will the next steps be. So we're not career coaches necessarily, but it is something that people do bring to sessions,
Mhm.
even leaders um, in some of my coaching sessions. So curious to talk a little bit about how leaders are managing through what we could consider a crisis right now in our country. And I'm glad to be speaking with you about that. One of the things that keeps standing out to me is a podcast where I heard, as I mentioned to you, Mark Elias from Democracy Docket talking about leaders and how we really need leaders to stand up right now in a variety of positions. And some of them don't feel that they're able to really lead, and that's understandable. And maybe it's important for them to just go ahead and step aside so somebody else can do the leadership that's required right now. So much is
Mm.
happening on a day-to-day basis and even over the weekends that needs a response. Maybe not a reaction, but a response and a
Mm.
measured response. And we I'm finding that we people are looking for leaders to help them respond and for the leader themselves to show signs of responding. So, anyways, curious what your thoughts are, what you've been hearing about how leaders are navigating right now in this, pretty difficult time.
Mhm. Well, I appreciate the quote you brought in and really, how you're thinking about tying all these threads together. And just to kind of loop back for a second, I think what you're saying about kind of the distinction between the career and leadership and what we're up to is really these big essential questions of meaning, purpose, and belonging, and sort of what is ours
Mhm.
to do in this, and how do we ground in that. And that distinction you made between reaction and response is so right in, I think, the sweet spot of, um, what's important for how we engage with the world. And in terms of really what I've been seeing and thinking about with leadership is just that individual humans were only really built to handle so much uncertainty until it becomes overwhelming. That certainty
Mhm.
is really such a deep need that we have as human beings. And so, how to really stay grounded in this massive amount of chaos and ambiguity and uncertainty right now, um, and
Yeah.
really how most of the time as we get dysregulated and into our amygdalas, we seek to find control, which is really based more out of fear than kind of the personal empowerment piece if we can stay grounded. So really trying to just work with leaders to stay grounded, to stay sort of as much kind of in embodied, to be able to respond rather than react, and how much psychological safety we need to create for ourselves, for our teams, for our communities to be able to do that. And what is our level of distress tolerance? How do we kind of build our window of tolerance, it's called in
Good.
polyvagal psychological theory, of being able to be with discomfort and, kind of stay regulated as the discomfort builds. And how are we plugged in with communities of our peers and of the people we're leading?
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's a huge topic as well. In moments of chaos in a person's life, and you can get into chaos at any time for any reason, or how developed you are as a human being. Those are the moments where you can really go to your two pillars, which are self-care and community of support. So
Mm.
I've been telling people that all the time. And the first part, the self-care is what I kind of hear you talking about in terms of regulation, knowing what your window of tolerance is, and and then knowing what to do about it when you reach a particular place. One of the things that we are exploring as a firm, which is really exciting, especially for some of our tech happy clients, is biometrics. Yeah, people can begin to measure what is happening in our nervous systems through biometrics.
Mhm.
And that way they can know when they're beginning to get to their window of tolerance or outside their window of tolerance. And then it's time to stop. And these tools help them to know to pause and find restoration, find that deep rest. And people might think that they're resting by, like, I don't know, reading a book or vegging out in front of the TV or even social media. I don't know. You can track it with the biometrics, how restorative a particular activity is, which is really exciting. And I've been telling people about Richard Boyatzis' work for a long time at Case Western, who talks a lot about our default mode network and our analytic networks and how to, that we need periods of rest throughout a day in order to have that resiliency to counter the being in the analytic network. The biometrics help people to know, oh, so no, I didn't find that rest time after this moment of stress. And so
Mm.
now, like, my score is not so great right now when I go to bed, maybe I won't sleep as well. And it's really informative for people. Have you used any of biometrics before?
I personally have not. I know a lot of people love to do it to track their sleep and kind of meditation time, what's happening. Um,
Mm,
but conceptually, what you're speaking to, I think, um, I have been recommending sort of technologies in terms of some apps
mm,
for people to use. I think that's probably what you're
mhm,
speaking to, and kind of the Aura rings and
mm.
all the various kind of watches and
Yeah,
measuring
Apple
their.
Watch,
Yeah,
and then of course the tool, the heart math tool, which has been around for some time now.
that's right.
That's a great tool for coherence, heart, mind coherence.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm speaking to. So it's great that there are these tools for people. I don't know
mm.
that do we have tools for our community of supports? How much social support we're getting? And what are you hearing from clients, from our colleagues about leaders, really connecting in a community right now?
I think that's a great question. That's actually, I think, something more I've been thinking about forward thinking, what might need to be
Mm,
offered. I'm not sure what kind of peer-to-peer support there is. I think people tend to get kind of heads down
mm,
in crises and really be trying to put out fires rather than sort of popping the heads up above the parapet and trying to kind of reach out and connect. So also have been thinking some, haven't done any work in this area, but have been kind of starting to research, what sort of technologies might even be out there to help community build, to help people connect, even kind of more in the world of AI. Um,
mm.
so I don't know if there's anything that you've been seeing in that arena.
I do have a client who is very much focused on building community of supports and also kind of going more analog, going
Mm,
offline for communities. And I'm not sure what he's going to develop, but there are quite a few people who are thinking about this. I think we've been hearing over and over again the importance of being in community of like-minded people, being in safe community, of rallying together and for whatever variety of reason. And
mm,
so I think there may be more solutions coming out this year and
mm,
next to address this,
mm.
whether it's tech or whether it's in person. Again,
Yes.
I mean, I remember the days of going to meetups all the time. It was so vibrant to connect with people and get that support. And of course, there are dinner parties, round tables where people are coming around and getting that support in the
Mhm.
privacy of somebody's home. Like how can we create those kind of gathering places? Um, yeah, I'm sure a lot of that stuff is happening. It's been happening in some communities
Mhm.
more than others for a long time now.
I would agree. I think there are also there's the socioeconomic piece seen a lot here in San
Mm,
Francisco with everything going on in the world. There's been a real resurgence in this area of mutual aid groups and the
mm,
idea of just neighbors coming together to build community and kind of be ready for whatever supports might be necessary, which I know,
yeah.
here I am in liberal San Francisco, but I think there's kind of this old culture of resilience or resistance or however you want to characterize it, where people kind of have this institutionalized knowledge of how to gather and support,
Mm,
or there might
mm,
be some things to learn there too.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing about that.
Hmm.
Um, so let's shift to the leader's team and unit organization in some cases. What have you been hearing from people about how they're supporting the people that are kind of looking to them to lead or under their kind of care? What are you hearing about what people are doing and what are your thoughts about what might work for them?
I think what I've been hearing is kind of to the last point is just how are people building connections? Kind of what are the qualities of the connections that leaders are building again, kind of with their peers, but also with their teams, and thinking about I always kind of build the two pillars of, there's self-regulation and there's co-regulation with
Mm,
others. And that can be with humans, but also with animals and nature and, kind of what is spirituality with the other. And thinking about, how are leaders showing up? How are they fostering their self-regulation to then be able to offer kind of their regulated selves as
mm,
leaders to their teams? It's very grounding with our mirror neurons, as Dan Siegel talks about, that's kind of create our systems by offering our own nervous systems. kind of hearing where leaders are able to do that and how it keeps teams grounded. Some of that is also
Mm,
just through really standing in the meaning and purpose of what are we up to here,
mm,
keeping everyone grounded in that. And leaders really thinking about this whole idea of regenerative systems, I think is kind of new and cutting edge, moving beyond this idea of sustainability, which is, how do we create value without harming, and
mm,
to more, how do we create this increasing value? How do we maybe, kind of have net additive value in the world over time? And I think that's something that Evolve's been doing a lot of thinking about from what I've understood in our conversations. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
um, well, I think in general, our coaching practice, our training and integral coaching and just
Mm,
evolves practice in general, it is always about what is emerging that is
mm,
alive.
mm,
So, so much of
mm,
the ways that people and organizations take shape is based on what they pay attention to. So if they are not paying attention to what's alive, how are they going to generate what's next? How are they going to regenerate? I guess. And so we really want to look at what is emerging anytime we
mm,
work with somebody. It's just less hard than bringing in some huge consulting firm that's going to take a look at all of your problems, whatever it is that you're bringing to that you need help with, and take a look at all of that, sort through everything, and kind of do whack-a-mole about what you're going to focus on.
mm,
We like to be as streamlined as possible about what's emerging that is going to take you to someplace new. And maybe the someplace new is an old place that you
mm,
have to remember,
mm.
but if it's a remembering, that's someplace new as well. But basically, it's something is
Yes.
shifting. And in that way, it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling, regenerative thing when you work with us, um, because we find that, and then it's just getting unleashed for somebody for the
Mm,
organization.
mm,
Um, so it's very complicated within companies. And I think part of why people are struggling these days is its complexity. And we can focus on any number of things, but our people are really having a hard time keeping up with all of that complexity. What are you going to focus on? And I think what we ask people to prioritize is what is it that's floating their boat, like literally
mm,
making their bodies and nervous systems feel
mm,
alive. We have the cue right there when we talk to people about what's going on. Okay, so the leader kind of gets that, or whoever we're talking with, and then we create initiatives to help the people get that feeling as well about what's
mm,
making them come alive. And so one of the tools we have for that are these in-person retreats that we're holding now, where the leader can bring their people out, and then the people can, for instance, it's a retreat where people have the opportunity to also volunteer and get
mm,
out in the environment, as you and I think I mentioned to you, so that it gives people a sense for like what aliveness feels like
mm,
when you're watching, when you're looking for the osprey nest, when you're looking at eggs, or when you're watching the little terrapins and counting
mhm,
terrapins, or these different things you're doing, or even like collecting oyster shells to then be recycled. That's the cycle of life. I mean, that is helping people like and get closer to this aliveness that I'm mentioning, and then it kind of helps them tap into what's alive in me right now, like what's cracking in me right now that's trying to be
mm,
born, what's trying to walk down and find the shore right now in me. And that's a great strategy for, I don't know, just unleashing more aliveness within a company.
mm.
Yeah.
That,
So thanks for asking about that.
yeah, that's really beautiful. I mean, in a way, to kind of go to our integral coaching backgrounds, is it sounds like it's almost like scaling vertical development.
Mm,
like kind of beyond the individual, like in the individual, but then really kind of thinking about the connection to what the company is up to or how people are feeling in as a company or within the greater
yeah.
system of just yeah, the world, as you're saying, having people really connect with the natural world, kind of almost a
Yeah.
connective cycle.
Mm, yeah. Thanks for reflecting that. Yeah. I mean, we're all doing this together. And I think those are the organizations that are successful right now are the ones that are the leader is able to say and the people are able to feel we're all in this together. And there's a
Hmm.
trust. Oh,
Yes.
we could bring in so many studies right now about the trust issues that companies have and organizations have with their people right now. I mean, but we don't need to. Just go look it up.
That's a separate conversation, perhaps.
That's a separate thing. Or also, you could just look up all the research
Yes.
on the trust issues, and there's a lot that could be really supportive. But the ones that are successful, the ones that are, we're all in this together. Me, the leader, I have to develop just like you, the
Mhm.
person who, non-leader, whatever other role you also need to develop. And we're finding also that the organizations that there is that what you might call hypocrisy or lack of integrity with the leadership is not, they're not getting loyalty of their people. People are leaving, people are unhappy, they're not as productive. And so anyway, I'm getting into the research anyway, but we are finding that out with our own, within our work, our own work at Evolve. So that's been really interesting to learn about.
Mhm.
Um, well, I just have one more thing for us to talk about. What about moving beyond survival, which has been mostly about right now, to
Mhm.
thriving
Yes.
through all of this? Like, what opportunity for growth and transformation exists with leaders and organizations? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think thanks for that question. These are all just so thought-provoking, kind of exciting to contemplate. And thinking ahead, where my mind goes just is to, the idea of how do we build in more resilience? And there's so much psychology around how to do that for the individual, and really thinking about then kind of going up through kind of to the macro system, thinking about how do you scale that and what does that look like at companies, and how can companies, I think leaders also think about affecting the systems in which they're a part. And um what comes up for me a lot is thinking about we're in this system of economics where there's a lot of focus on consumption and sort of like what are the measures of GDP that we're swimming in that really
Mm,
drive then a lot of how companies then kind of fit into the system. And there's some short-termism that's driven by quarterly reports and annual reports. And I think it's kind of almost thinking about from the meaning, purpose, belonging piece is sort of like what's the legacy and how do we, even if we are operating within the constraints of the greater system that exists right now, is there a way to think more about legacy? I think is how I'd
mm,
almost put it for
mm,
leaders of what does that look like and how can we kind of think about that as almost a capacity building exercise for the overall system. um, I don't know if you have any reactions. Well, you smiled, so I
yeah.
think you have some thoughts.
Tell us more about legacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of comes down to, it's one thing to kind of have, and I don't want to diminish, having a profitable quarter or having
Mm,
success in a certain sector or industry. But I wonder what it's like for companies, and I know this is very common in sort of smaller family-owned businesses, is thinking about almost because there's a name associated with it or a very much more personal connection, but really
mm,
thinking about, how do we want to be thought of even when we're gone? And
mm,
what does that look like? And again, there are so many products that are essential for our lives, and yet how can we be thought of as more than, say, and I don't want to diminish it, but kind of like what are we besides widget producers? Like, and
mhm,
I know that every company has its value proposition, but perhaps there's a way to almost scale that up to like how are we impacting um, the world and leaving it in a better place with what we're up to. And maybe that's too ideological and aspirational in our current system, but I sort of think what we're seeing in this chaos is that some of these old ways of thinking about business or the privatization of government that's being promoted right now is, are there spaces where we actually should be thinking that kind of like friction or slowness, inefficiencies, kind of the slowness that creates space actually has a higher impact? And I'm not saying necessarily that translates to businesses, but really just thinking about, yeah, what do we stand for, I think, and what are we adding to the world in a way
Mm.
that, how will we be remembered? And
Mm.
is that aligned with our values? I think is
Yeah,
the
that's so great.
PHR, whatever.
Oh, that's really great to hear you talking about legacy. And yeah, I see like kind of the journey from somebody who's solely profit driven to thinking about legacy and what is in between, like, which is value. It could be values, be what you feel like your purpose is, could be what's your North Star. It could be,
Yes.
you know, what makes you feel healthy and happy. You know,
Mhm.
that's not, it takes some time to figure out what that is. If you've been hard charging your whole life and you're profit driven, you might not know that. So you do have to slow down, like you said, to attune. One of my favorite words is to attune to yourself and what matters to you. What does make you healthy and happy. I'd be curious about, some if there's some study that could take place that's like measures profit driven leaders and then like profit and purpose driven leaders and to kind of see if what the difference is in terms of health and wellness and vitality. I'd be curious. My hypothesis is that, if you include profit and purpose or legacy as well, then that you would be just a happier, healthier human being. But that would be an interesting study.
Yeah,
So
it would
thank you
be.
for, yeah, thank you for sharing about that. I really appreciate thinking about the opportunities. And I would agree that the opportunity is to rally together with other people around what we care the most about. There's something about chaos and stress that is an opportunity for people to pause and say, no, not me. That
Mm,
chaos, what that is, whatever that is, that's not me. Okay, you can say not me, not me, not me forever.
mm,
So why don't we start talking about, okay, what is you?
mhm,
What is you then? Because I think that's really courageous. If you can
mhm,
pause and say that, go to that next level. And then that takes courage, and then takes courage to say, I'm going to be me. I'm
mm,
going to be me and believe in what I believe in.
mm,
And I think you have the opportunity where if you have the chaos on the outside, it actually can create an even stronger unfolding of yourself. So I think that's a great opportunity for leaders, and I'm really looking forward to like being surprised by how
mm.
people respond,
Yes.
by being delighted
Yes.
by how
Yes.
they respond. Like,
Yes.
what you? Okay, bring it. That's you? Awesome.
Yes. Yeah. I really appreciate that thought and that kind of perspective because I think, without that, like I kind of have this sense of amidst kind of this storm, kind of just feeling like rooted in what you're
Hmm.
saying. Like if you really know who you are, you can really root down and stay kind of strong and peaceful and kind of one place while the world swirls. And you're sharing that kind of leads to where I've been spending my thinking, but I'm thinking, wow, gosh, like you're talking about the real foundational piece. I think the question I've been asking has been like, what is mine to do? And I think
Yeah.
that's sort of the next step is, or at the same time in the mess of the world, is sort of really getting that anchor of this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and having that courage to show up and then kind of figure out what is mine to do in all of this and courageously also take some action, no matter how big or small.
Yeah. Yeah, I just got goosebumps when you talked about that. Yeah.
Mm,
'Cause there's so much that could be mine to do. It could be
mm,
anybody's to do. There's so much, and that's where a lot of people are struggling, knowing what it is. There's so many opportunities, and if you go back and root in who you are, that
mm,
will that will tell you. Maybe not what you're gonna be the best in the world at. It might be what you're gonna be the best in the world at. Might
mhm,
also just be literally what is for you to do.
mhm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for talking with me about all of this inspiring stuff today.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you about all these things. We've had some really, really wonderful kind of unexpected conversations outside of this that have just gotten all sorts of ideas and energy flowing for me. And so I think this is just an example of kind of that co-regulation or that human connection that's really needed right now to help people figure out, kind of where are we and what do we stand in and what is ours to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think.
it is a great example of that. Yeah. And yeah, hopefully this kind of thing will also encourage people to not look away, not hide away from the chaos, but to kind of know that there's some things to consider right now in terms of being able to navigate it. And we have no idea what we're capable of until
Mhm.
we give ourselves a try. So just hoping that people will continue to keep the faith in what's possible right now. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great conversation. I look forward to the next one.
Me too.